So anything new, exciting with any of you before we start talking about irrelevant things?
Yes, I have.
Sure.
So my sister.
Allahu Akbar.
My sister is having a girl, her first girl, and so she's going to be a part of our family. And so I'm a boy auntie, and so I have three nephews, 16, 7, and 4. And so my sister's having a little girl, and so I'm super excited about that because she's due any time now, and so yeah, I can't wait to be here. So yeah.
Tell her, please, this is not Oprah Winfrey, but good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else with something that's a bit more exciting? Getting anything? No? Andrew? Matt?
One of my friends is also having a girl this week.
Emilio?
I took my kids on a walk today around our neighborhood, the school that I work at.
Well, you took the kids on a walk?
Yeah.
How many?
Today I had 9.
Oh,
Yeah.
you had your hands full.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about
I think you guys should get to class like half hour early to just chit chat amongst yourselves.
We
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
We
We
did.
did.
You got here with
Well, thank God I wasn't here. So that probably ended my life.
I think the youngest one is like almost 2,
Oh,
and the oldest is almost 3.
Oh, okay. You
Jeez.
have a little one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
They're amazing.
Still sorry.
Look, they're amazing until they give you pink eye. Then you're like,
Oh, yeah.
oh, shoot, get away.
Or
They give
hand,
it
foot,
to
and
you?
mouth.
Huh?
Or hand, foot, and mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Don't want that.
Okay, anything else that's like relevant to what we've been talking about for the past 5 months? No one? Olivia?
On Tuesday, one of my dad's closest friends died. So how would I best comfort my dad?
Just leave him alone. Yeah. Yeah, Matt.
What are your thoughts on epistemology? Like, this is the philosophy of knowing.
Yeah. Hello. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Oh, I was going to tell you, that family member in the hospital, that's why I'm doing this, so I don't know.
So around the 17th century, there had been lots of stuff going on, especially wars, and these are religious wars for the most part. And there came a point where I suppose some people just got really tired of people just living their lives through the whims of faith without really knowing what faith is, what we know, what we assume, all those things. So all of a sudden there was this division that occurred within, I suppose, not just the culture, but the human psyche as well. That what can we actually know? The forerunner of this was René Descartes. He was French. He wanted to, for the first time, I suppose, prove the existence of God, not so much through faith and devotion, but through rationality. Hello. But all that aside, let me just give you what I think. Imagine for a moment that I've had an absentee father. For a variety of different reasons, he just failed to be part of my life. He had his own issues to deal with. And so he started drinking and smoking and just, being a burden to all of us kids and my mom and all those things. And so I go to the bookstore. I still love the guy, let's just say. I go to the bookstore and I buy some books on alcoholism, on overcoming addiction. And my assumption is that ink on paper, i.e. information, i.e. data, once my father begins to read those passages, maybe something about him will transform. I don't know much about addiction. I don't know much about habits. I don't know much about routines. I don't know much about the emotional repression that all of us in this class suffer from. All I know is that I like my father, maybe even love him, but he's a complete mess and he's impacting the family in a very, very negative way. And I'm doing all this stuff because I assume that, the information contained in these books or maybe audio lectures will somehow help him, transform him, open a portal inside him and he can kind of just walk through and figure things out. And then I get married. What I know is how addiction expresses itself, how alcoholism expresses itself. For my father, he just happens to be very mean-spirited and violent to some extent, abusive. So, being isolated and left alone most of my life, I hit the age of 20, maybe a little younger. I get together with someone, she gets pregnant, and I promise myself I have most of my life, adult life, that I'm never going to be like my father. I don't really understand the complexities of life, but nevertheless, I have that imagination. I'm going to be very different from my father. I'm going to be exempt from the slings and arrows of life, that life will be a bit kinder to me, nicer to me. I'll have capacities that my father doesn't really have, never had. And so I drop out of school. I get 2-3 jobs, move from a studio to a one-bedroom. The romance between my wife or my companion and I kind of end because that's what happens when you have children. There are moments of excitement, inspiration, even romance, but for the most part, it's just, diapers and formulas and this and that. At a certain point, it happens to all of us, which is a breaking point. None of us know what our capacity really is unless you're tested, You think you're in love and you can handle almost everything until you come to realize that, you being dismissed by your companion is just a bit too much at this stage in your life, or you feeling invisible in the relationship is a bit too much. So no one knows what their salt is unless they are tested. And so I go through life assuming that to some extent I know how my life is going to unfold and what I'm about and those things. Coming to realize that life is quite burdensome, I go towards something I've seen my entire life, which is my father. Whenever life was difficult, he would go to a bar, start drinking. I've never done it, but I said it's worth a shot, so I would. And little by little, my drinking habits increase from 1 beer to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. And then I would somehow overcome the element of shame. I would just go home drunk. And I wouldn't care how my mom would look at me, how my kids would look at me, my wife. Sometimes I would scream and shout. And again, once the element of shame goes away, you just don't care about any of those things, At least in case of Adam and Eve, when they get caught, they have the fig leaf or something. It's because they respect God, because they fear God, they adore God. And once they realize that they have gone against God's commandments, they kind of feel guilty. And from that, shame comes about, remorse comes about, repentance comes about. But in my case, none of those things happen because I don't really care. There are these moments of reflection where I am sober, but it's quite painful because I have to carry two crosses now. The cross of having this addiction to alcohol, also coming to realize that I have been abusive towards my family. Now, I assume that I can overcome my addiction. It's something I had preached to my father most of my time. All of a sudden I come to realize it's really, really a difficult cross to carry, and it's a difficult thing to overcome. Now, I make these plans, like all of us in this class who make plans for our lives. We get a notepad, we get a pen or a pencil, and we say to ourselves, well, if I take these classes, 12 units a semester, in about 2 years' time, I'll graduate. 3 years' time, I'll find someone. 4 years' time, I'll be pregnant with 5 kids. This is the things that we do oftentimes, to have control over life, to predict our future. But events happen, and you kind of scrap your note sheets, and you kind of feel homeless on the inside and sometimes on the outside as well. Now, for the longest time, at least in my relationship with my father, I assumed that I understood what it means to drink, why someone drinks, and the path to overcoming alcoholism. And now I look myself in the mirror and I see a carbon copy of my father, and that's me. For the first time, my understanding, or I should say my set of assumptions, are tested. And I fail every quiz, every test, every final exam. I had assumed that I have a great capacity to overcome a lot of things, but I realize I am quite poor. I have no patience. I really don't have much of a will. And not only do I have to suffer from the fact that I have created a life I don't really want, I must also suffer from the fact that I want to overcome something that I can't on my own. I'm not yet in the position of understanding, because right now all I am is just a bundle of emotions. I'm just reacting to my circumstances. At a certain point, I say to myself, I'm so tired of just being emotionally exhausted and emotionally angry. I need help. Okay. You have to be really desperate. And that's the thing. I think about also these ideas, that you really can't understand our conversation tonight about the story of the Buddha unless you are desperate. You have to be put in the way he was. That's the only way you can understand why someone would leave their parents, their culture, their kingdom, their wealth, to pursue something they can't see, touch, or taste, or smell, or hear. So, and I suppose I go to the AA center. I stand up and I say, I'm Amir Sabzvari, I'm an alcoholic. All I know is that I'm now with a group of people who are in the same position. Maybe for different reasons, but in the same position now. Now, I still don't know how I can be helped. But the very fact that I can find myself in a community of diseased people, that itself has a healing quality. That all of us are wounded in some shape or form, and none of us anymore have any shame of coming out and saying, I am wounded and I'm limping along and my life is a complete mess. And then the person guiding this community begins to tell us that we need to delete our contact information, the contact people. And I realize that I have this intimate relationship with most of the people on my cell phone. They've been my drinking buddies for the past 5, 6, 7, 10 years. And it's not that just we drink all the time. We also barbecue, we play cards, we go to the movies, we go to Yosemite. There are lots of history there. But because of one very, very powerful element that binds all of us together, which is alcohol, they kind of become poison if I want to recover. And for the first time, I begin to realize that the people I assume to be my friends can't be my friends anymore. And that's a really difficult place to be. It's difficult to understand, and it's difficult to kind of apply that understanding to life. Because should I get rid of them, who am I going to hang out with? Just the people I see in the AA. And I've also come to understand or realize that my life is busy. I don't really have much time to spare. And the only way you can create friendship, and this is something that happens with young people, not so much with older folks, because young people, you have the leisure of time, of energy. You can just go out there and just waste whatever. And in wasting time, wasting money, and hanging out with stupid people to some extent, you create friendships. Sometimes they become great friendships, As you get a little older, your life gets a bit more busy. You have less time to waste, and you have less money to waste, and your health is down the toilet in some ways. And so you realize that it's really difficult to kind of get rid of those people. But eventually you do. And you do, as Karen had said yesterday about bitterness. It's this bitter poison you swallow. Okay? And then you go home, and there is no one home. There is no wife, there are no kids, they've all left you. And all you have are the memories of how you would get rid of your pain through drinking, through talking with your friends who are there no more because you've deleted the numbers. And you have to understand the pangs of loneliness. And you're not going to easily understand that, because first you have to go through depression. And there are going to be relapses. Long story short, after, I suppose, many years, just taking small steps at a time, after 5, 10, 15, 20 years, like Robin Williams or like Al Pacino, like Brad Pitt, like some of us in this class, you finally become emancipated, you become liberated. You say, you know what, I've done this before, I am sober, I've been sober for about 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And even if alcohol was to walk near you, you kind of just walk away. And for the first time, you understand your life, you understand your health, you understand the impact. So you have, I suppose, 2 different kinds of understanding. One is one you get from books, okay? And the other one you get from the pains caused by life, where you react to it angrily. And then there comes a point where you're just tired of being angry. You get depressed, you get sad, you become lonely. And then if you're lucky, you overcome it. And then you begin to write a book, How to Overcome Alcoholism. When you start from the beginning, my father, A, B, C, D. I felt abandoned. I felt like an orphan. I had sex at the age of 14, 15, 16. She got pregnant. I was forced into a life I didn't want, but I was forced nevertheless. It got a bit too much. I started drinking the way my father did. And after a few years, I looked myself in the mirror and I saw my father. I didn't see myself. And then I tried to overcome it. I couldn't. I sought help. And it's a good book, filled with understanding and insight and wisdom. So one understanding is just, you just collect information and you assume that you understand when in fact you don't. The other is life offers you events, you fall apart. If you're able to put yourself back together in a nice, healthy way, then you can understand a few things. Anyone else? Andrew?
looks like.
First, we are conditional animals, you know, which means that we're all like tax collectors. And we all play this bargaining game. I'm not talking about the first 2 weeks where there is infatuation, obsession, not really love, but just infatuation, obsession. And I guess I would say it this way to just simplify things for myself. You know, one of the mysteries of, I suppose, love is you look at someone and you don't really need to know them. There's just something about their physical body. There's just something about their eyes. There's just something about their face. There's just something about their body. And you just become mesmerized by it. You don't need to know them. You don't need to understand them. You don't need to know their history. There's just something about the physical human body that pulls you towards itself. Okay? And so once you begin to spend some time with that body, then you have emotions growing out of it. Okay? And one of the ways that love ultimately expresses and fulfills itself is through the act of sex. You know, two bodies grinding with one another. But what you're also doing is you're exchanging a great amount of emotions, longing, yearning, passion. So whatever lives inside you, the only way it can kind of find a home, all the emotions that live inside you, is through the act of sex. Okay. So in that sense, you could say that one of the faces of love is about you loving another person, which started through their bodies. Okay. Now, one of the, again, these mysterious thing about love is that when you spend some time with someone's body, eventually you're going to have a relationship with that body. You see them in the kitchen. You guys sit in the car and you drive to like House of Non and Carrie in Berkeley. You go to Yosemite together. Emotions are created, relationship is built, and there's a good amount of history. Okay. Now, when you and this person become a bit more comfortable, temperaments begin to show themselves, and personalities begin to show themselves, and history begins to show themselves. Okay. But because the bodies have now become connected, now the two of you have enough care and respect for one another to kind of figure out what the hell you want to do with all these conflicts. She comes from this particular background, you come from this particular background. It's kind of like Prince of Bel-Air. You know, there is Will Smith and there is Carlton, two completely different human beings from two completely different cultures. Okay. Now, there comes a point where you realize that yes, you love this person, and this again, this particular love is founded on interaction between two bodies. There comes a point where you realize that this relationship is not going to go anywhere, and you don't want it to go anywhere. You no longer are interested in it. You no longer like it. You know, it's like the saying that you'll feel the loneliest sometimes in relationships. You know, sometimes you go home, you look at your companion, and you kind of just feel so alone just by looking at them. You know, because they do become a mirror. They become a mirror to who you are, what your life looks like, and what your life is going to look like. And you can't see any hope or meaning in it. And that is what that person reflects back to you. And you say, I am so lonely. There comes a point where you have engaged with people enough through their physical bodies where you say, you know, when I get into a relationship or when I talk to someone, I want to have certain type of emotions inspire about me. And so even though you may be attracted to someone's physical body, now you kind of have this checklist. Are these emotions that live inside me, are they coming out? Are they being met? Now what you have is an emotional relationship. Sometimes what happens, especially with people who have trauma, i.e., say, let's just say depression, or some unresolved issues, there comes a point they no longer care about the other person's physical attributes. What they really care about is, have they been betrayed the way I have been betrayed? Have they gone through the same stuff that I have been going through? You know, and then what happens is the two physical bodies sit together and talk about how awful their fathers have been, or how awful their job has been. So the exchange of trauma, that's how they have sex. Okay. So from physical sex, now you go into emotional sex. And when you keep talking about each other's traumas, that's how the relationship is formed. There comes a point where, again, you kind of gain some maturity and you say, I am so tired of talking about my junk. You know, I just don't want to hear myself talk, and I don't want to definitely not hear talk about this stuff. And there comes a point where you're just saturated. And saturation is interesting. If you get a dry napkin and you kind of dump it in water, okay, the napkin absorbs the water, but there comes a point that it's just too much water on a tiny piece of napkin, so it begins to drip. There comes a point in all relationships where you're saturated with the other person. Whatever they say, it just ricochets off of you. You're just no longer interested. Okay. There comes a point where you begin to be a bit more reflective. Okay. You begin to read perhaps different kinds of books. You begin to listen to different audiobooks, and you realize you're no longer like reading books about relationships. You're reading a book about, I don't know, self-transformation perhaps. You're more, let's just say, focused this day and age about yoga, let's just say. Okay. And so you're a bit more intellectual. And so even though you may be interested in someone's physical body, and even though you may be interested in someone's emotional traumas, what the two of you will do is you will sit in a coffee shop, they'll tell you a trauma, and you try to reflect on the trauma and give it back to them. Now, should they not be receptive, or should they not be your equal intellectually, then there's a good chance you're going to part ways. Should, on the other hand, you guys have deep and meaningful conversations, you know, then what you have is intellectual relationship. And with that, of course, comes the emotions, and with that also comes the physical attributes and engagements. Now, remember again what you're doing. You go somewhere, you look at someone's physical body, they look interesting, you go to them. And you begin to examine if inside that body lives the emotions that you enjoy, if inside that body lives ideas that you enjoy. And that mostly depends on your own maturity. And there comes a point where you say, I have dragged my body to all sorts of places. Everybody looks the same and feels the same and tastes the same. I no longer really need to go to Europe. What I need to do is just go to New York, MacDougall Street, which is very much like going to Italy. It's no difference. Okay. Sometimes you say, maybe I don't even need to go to New York. I can just go to San Francisco. It's the same thing. And sometimes you say, I don't even need to go there. I just don't care about those things. And what happens is you kind of live a relatively disembodied life. Your physical body has no place to be housed. And you no longer care about, say, the emotions that people in city, kind of like Gilgamesh and Enkidu. You don't care about their job. You don't care about like their kids walking, you know, taking them to the park or walking around the neighborhoods, or your niece or nephew giving birth to a rat or a mouse. You don't care about those things. You know, and when someone says, well, let me tell you about Immanuel Kant, or let me tell you about the Gospels, you don't really care about those things either. Okay. There comes a point that you are kind of beyond all of those things. You're in a no man's land. You are kind of like Gilgamesh. That something about you, the civilized Andrew, has died. Okay, you don't much care about your body. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to start eating unhealthy or drinking or smoking, but what you do is you don't put your body in a car, take it to here and take it there for a quickie. Quick in the sense that you don't want to go to Berkeley, walks amongst people just to distract yourself from boredom. Sometimes it's healthy, but for the most part, you become a recluse. Emotionally, you're tired of other people's junk. You're even tired of your own junk. You're just not even tired. You're just no longer interested. You've been saturated. And there comes a point where you don't read books just to collect data or information. Okay? You want it to go to a certain part of you that you can't express, you can't describe. You don't really know what you can title it or give it a name. All you know is that there is part of me that yearns or hungers for something, and that needs to be nourished. And so you begin to go out to coffee shops or maybe dating apps. Okay? Now, you're a human being, And you're not going to be interested in someone who is like older than you or not very attractive. You're going to always go towards someone who's attractive. Always. Okay, that's the bait. And then you're going to spend some time with them. Then you're going to ask them, so where do you go to have fun? Maybe they'll say, I usually just stay home and cook. If they say, well, I party all the time, I hang out with my friends, then you say, well, who are your friends? What do you guys do with your friends? We party, we drink, we smoke. And after 10 minutes, you kind of look at your watch and you say, I'm really, really sorry. I just got a message. You know, your mom has died. I'm leaving. Yeah. So you begin to look for someone very, very specific, but still you go through their body. You still go through their emotions, their past, whether they have recovered from some of the issues that they suffered from early on in life. You begin to examine their intellect, what they think about, their ideas, what they're interested in. And I guess by the time you get to this place in your life where you're mostly about, lack of better word, spiritual quest, you really don't have very much need for people. You know, your job isn't really to sit and have conversations, because by the time you get there, you realize that no one down here can really give you much. But you still have friends. Once in a while you call them. Once in a while. You know, should you be lucky enough to run into someone who is your spiritual equal, maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower, then you'll begin to hang out with them. I mean, that's why cults are so important. And all of us belong to a cult. There is like a cult of babysitters. They just sit and talk about babies. There is a cult of like, I don't know, smokers or people who drink or people who watch porn or people who sit like Karl Marx when he was younger, the young Hegelians. They sit and talk about, you know, Hegel. Then there's another cult about politics. So that's how you find, you know, your own reflection. And so I suppose you could say that you love this person because of their spiritual quality, but your sex life is also good, your emotional life is also good, and once in a while you have conversations that are worth having. So again, long story short, you move from one's body to one's emotions to one's mind, and then finally you get to a place where you want autonomy, you want independence. You want to figure things out on your own. And for the most part, you're very, very quiet. Yeah. Anyone else?
Does grief last forever? Or like, does it
I think as long as you're in the grieving mode, as long as you're in the stage where you're just sad, it's very difficult to see a future. If, for example, you and I are in a relationship and I'm very much attached to you, but you're not as attached to me, and rightly so, I am 62, you're like 22. Me knowing that I'm a little older, my chances out there are very, very slim, and I just happen to be lucky enough to have met you. You're going to have fears that don't exist in me. You know, this guy is good for another, maybe, you know how you buy like tires for your car. There's a tire that's good for like 20,000 miles, another tire that's good for 40,000, another tire for 60,000. You know, so and you realize that I'm only good for the next 5,000. Then I'm going to be limping around, and you're going to like take me to Kaiser every single day. And so you leave me, and I sit home, and the only thing that my life has is just grief. It's just darkness. I feel betrayed, I feel abandoned, and I'm in this grieving mode. And I do want to go out and date other people, but because I love you and because I'm broken by this love that I have for you, I remain stagnant. I can't move. Now, as long as I'm in that particular space, there is no hope that I see. There are no imaginations that bring me to light. I'm never going to find another person I can love. In fact, I will never be able to love, period. Now, there is something that's really interesting about us, which is we have this mechanism inside us that has the power to forget. It just needs time, okay? And one of the things that happens is if your grief doesn't become chronic, Okay, because the problem with chronic, anything that becomes chronic is that now it goes inside your soul. That becomes the root of this trunk and all the branches that come out. If it's a branch in your life that is filled with grief, you have other branches to hang on to. If it lives in the trunk, at least it's not in the roots. Okay. And I suppose the point is, when you have this army of grief attacking you from all corners, the best thing you can do is just sit and, respect it for what it is. It is painful. It is isolating. You're angry. You want to force it out. It's like, I have this uninvited guest. Initially it was fun, but now I'm tired. I want to move on, but I can't. There was a German poet by the name of Margaret Bigel, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and she had mentioned that sometimes when we lose something or when we lose someone and we grieve the loss, what we may not realize is that the loss was actually our benefit. It's only a matter of time before you come to realize that it's actually good that this person left your life. But going back to your question, there is no timetable. No one knows. Every one of us in this class have a different capacity. If I was to self-indulge for just a minute, I would say to you the following: just in case my parents die, and they're at an age where they're close to that particular moment, I can see myself grieving for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. That's it. Uh, Look, if you have $1,000 in your pocket and you lose a 20, it's not going to matter. If, on the other hand, you only have a 20 and you lose that, you're going to be devastated. If you walk into a relationship, to some extent, without much power, what happens in relationships, especially love relationship, everything about you has to do with the other person. They own you. Okay. If they go away, they also take a good amount of you with them. And you kind of feel lost. You have no idea who you are. It's always good to walk into any space with power. Know what relationships are, know how they function, know the various faces and shadows of love, know the function of men, know the function of yourself, know the function of sex. And with that knowledge and that understanding, when you walk into a relationship, just in case things fall apart, understanding all these things make you ready. And so your grieving process, instead of being 2 years, it'll be 2 weeks, maybe 2 months. It's like anything in life. If you're not prepared for it, you'll be devastated. And one of the nice things about our conversation about Buddhism tonight really has to do with the fact that everything has an expiration date. Everything and everyone is like milk. Some expire after 2 weeks, some expire after 2 months, some expire after 2 years, but they will expire. You will lose interest. It's just a matter of time. Now, that doesn't mean that you should leave them, but it does mean that, you have lived through the passion of this relationship. Now, if you want to go in the morning to a coffee shop and sit by yourself and read a book, and then, come home when he is not there, more power to you. You can be on your own in the kitchen, do some cooking, get ready or for dinner or, a night out. And then you come home after like a 5, 6, 7 hour break. You're not even going to miss him. As long as you know those things, it's good to be independent. For us these days, not for my parents' generation. Yeah. Anyone else before?
I had a question.
Yeah, of course, Deborah.
You was talking about yesterday about Jesus when he was 12 years old. He said that he was conceived through the Holy Spirit or God's Spirit, something like that. He was in the, I guess, synagogue, considered that he had left his parents. But by him being conceived that way, wouldn't that make him different, and that he know things an average 12-year-old wouldn't know, and he would have the power to go to the synagogue, on his own, because he has those, special genes or whatever.
So here's my awful response to your question, and forgive me.
Yeah, because I kind of thought.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
So I guess you're basing your knowledge of Jesus on Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. Some of the
You
stories.
said yesterday.
Right, okay. The problem that exists for me is that I have read Gospels where Jesus at the age of 6 was actually quite mean. And the problem that happens is that I can see Jesus as someone who is divine at the age of 12, but I see him as this tiny little kid who is mean, who is crude, who beats up people. He has powers and uses powers in a way that's just mean-spirited. And so when you speak about Jesus as being divine and being, this guy who understands things really, really well at the age of 12, well, that doesn't exist for me.
Oh, okay.
So what happened at 6, 8, 6, you said?
Read the infancy Gospels.
Oh,
Yeah. And it just talks about when he was, like 5. And he acted like an idiot. Anyone else?
So where would I get the infancy gospel?
You can just online it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for those of you who enjoy these things, just, pause watching porn for 10 minutes and just Google infancy gospel and you read it. Okay. Anyone else? E? Okay. So we'll talk about Buddhism a little bit. An interesting fellow. So there are these parents, this man and this woman. Some 2,000-3,000 years ago, they have sex. She's walking to Pete's coffee shop and she runs into this woman. Let's call her Deborah. Deborah happens to be this magician. But not really. Just Deborah is this really, really wise woman. She is like Socrates' teacher, Diotima. Very insightful about life, very insightful about human relationships, very insightful about love. In fact, Diotima, for those of you who are interested in the life of the great philosopher Socrates, the only thing that she taught him was the art of loving. She looks at this young woman and she says, "You just had sex." And this young woman says, "Well, that's rude. You're invading my space. I'm going to report you to my dean." No. You're pregnant. You're pregnant. And this woman says, "How do you know?" "I have powers, you know." But your life is going to be really, very, very, very sad. Sad. Having children is fun. Having children is a blessing. She shakes her head. She says, "No, it's not." And this young woman looks at this older woman, Deborah, and says, "Well, tell me more." First, "I don't really believe you." And Deborah sits her down and says, "Well, let me tell you what happened when you were 2. Let me tell you what happened when you were 12. Let me tell you that you liked the boy at the age of 16 whose name was Shah Rukh Khan. For those who may not know, he's an Indian actor. He's like the Brad Pitt of India. You know him? Isn't he great? Have you seen Devdas? So, just Devdas. Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gham? There you go. Good job. So, this old woman tells this younger woman all her secrets. So if she had any doubts, the doubts are removed. And this young woman looks at this old woman and asks, is there any way that my child will be happy? Is there any way that misery will not come to him? And the old woman says, well, yes, of course. One condition. What is that? As long as he is not touched by the realities of life, he'll remain happy. The concept, ignorance is bliss. As long as you are ignorant, as long as you don't know, as long as life hasn't touched you, as long as you haven't fallen in love and have not been broken by love, you will continue to believe in love. You will continue to have your innocence. But the moment you fall in love and are broken by love, next time you want to go into a relationship, you go with a little fear, you go with a little doubt, maybe a little anger. Okay? So this woman goes home, looks at her husband and says, I ran into this weirdo, by Lake Shore, and she told me that our kid is going to be miserable unless he never experiences realities of life. And so you're talking about a tradition where people take magicians very seriously, who at least claim to be clairvoyant, know a few things about people's interior, know a few things about future, how it's going to unfold. So this man, who happens to be a king, does something that most of us in this class will eventually do as parents. You leave downtown Oakland, you go to Montclair, Snakewood. You buy yourself a nice house away from civilization. And you make it a gated community. No one can just drive to your front yard without your permission. So let me then say a couple of things about what it means to be parent and what happens when you run into a Deborah and how you use your power once you become a parent. And if you've had, of course, a good GPS, like you've had your own parents as role models. The moment you become a parent, you become paranoid. The moment you become a parent, your eyes automatically open. They're forced open, and you begin to look at society. And there's a good chance you're not going to like 90% of the things that society has to offer. You used to be very callous with language. You used to express yourself through profanities, but now that you have a child, you refrain from doing that. You used to smoke, but now maybe you still do, but just far, far, far away from your child. And when you come back inside, you make sure you don't smell like weed. Okay. The first thing that you need to get from this story about 3,000 years ago is the insights and the wisdom of this old woman. If you're going to be born, life is going to impose on you certain truths. Those truths will remove your innocence. Those truths will make you look at things differently. Those truths will make you miserable. Those truths will make you suffer. Do you really think that my parents had us knowing that they're going to send us to India? My father wasn't making very much money way back then, in the 1960s. but because he just didn't like Persian education. He didn't like society. He saw himself and said, there is no hope in this country. People can't prosper. India has a good education, and it was known to as an educational center in the 1970s. So they sent us there. And they had to eat bread and potatoes for about 2 years. That's the only way they could survive. They didn't want Iran to harm their kids. That's what happens the moment you become a parent. You begin to hate everything that lives in civilization. If you have a sister who has rotten kids, you don't want to hang out with them. If you got parents who are angry, who drink, you don't want to be around them. If you've had friends who smoke or drink or use profanities or watch porn, you don't want to hang out around them. All of a sudden, you realize that you're just isolating yourself from life. Why? Something about you all of a sudden screams, life is dangerous. Remove yourself from life. Okay. Now, yeah.
Is that why, like, they tell us, like, not to get attached to worldly things?
Well, they say that. Yeah. Well, Middle East is different and Islam is different. I mean, look, it's like telling the Gazans, people in Palestine, don't be attached to the world. And they'll just laugh at you. Of course we can't be attached to the world. Bombs are dropping on a daily basis. We have no idea if we're going to survive the next 10 minutes. And so what you realize is that the Quran is not going to give you a message that contradicts the physical space in which you live. Okay? Muhammad eventually had to talk the language of the Bedouins. So if, for example, now you read certain passages in the Quran and there are certain words that just don't look familiar and you have no idea what they are, it's because that's the language of the Bedouins that we have lost touch with. We no longer know what they mean. Okay. Does that...
Yeah,
is it-
because, like, in Al-Khutbah, they were saying that to, like, how, like, what you said about Palestine.
Yeah.
Like, when you tell them don't get attached to everything, every second there's mental.
Yeah. And plus, the culture just focuses on death and destruction and misery all the time. So there is really, the people don't really have the capacity. I mean, marriages are arranged, so there isn't really much love. Kids, parents actually like spank kids, slap kids, kick kids, punch kids. Kids really have no autonomy, they have no independence, they can't really voice their ideas. Just in case they do, they get kicked, slapped, punched. So when you live in that harsh environment,
But I mean, everything is based off, like, problems
the what?
when you live in all.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, without your parents, you're just an outcast. Yeah. Distracted me. So, where was I? Yeah. So what do parents do? You spend all of your riches making sure your kids don't suffer. You send them to private school. You punish them. In other words, every parent initially creates a gated community where no poison enters. Okay? Now, one of the ways that his parents do this is by making sure a few things don't ever happen, at least in front of this kid. He's never going to see anything ugly. Sometimes, I hear parents saying, I'm going to send my kid to like soup kitchen so they can kind of see how homeless people live and how they are and what they are. So they could kind of widen their horizon, begin to think and reflect. And the truth is, you just need to wait. Eventually, the world will take your kids. You don't need to rush them into contamination. All you need to do is just help them how to think without exposing them to things they're not ready for. Now, there is no one unattractive in that community. Everyone's attractive. And what happens when everyone's attractive? All you have are pleasure, positive feelings about yourself, about life. You don't see homelessness. It's like Prince of Bel-Air, for those of you who've seen that show. Okay? Carlton doesn't know what racism is. It's only when he gets pulled over by a cop, a white cop, as they're driving in the dark with Will Smith. And even when they're in the cell, Carlton looks at Will and says, well, the cop has just made an innocent mistake. And Will tries to tell him, no, it's not an innocent mistake. The cop is a racist guy. And then the father comes in. Who is it? Uncle Ben? He comes in and he looks at the sheriffs and he says, if you don't release my kids, I'll sue you. And that's when they are released. But the point is, Carlton is a guy who lives in the Garden of Eden. Will Smith, on the other hand, he's been to hell and back. So he knows a few things about life. If I was to go around this class and ask you about love, and if you were comfortable enough to really, really open up, you would say that initially you lived in this gated community. You understood love through books, through movies, through novels, through the gossip of your friends, through YouTube. But the moment the gates opened and you in fact fell in love and got a taste of what love is and what it can do, if I ask you now, you say, well, move into love cautiously. Don't be so quick. And that is what the old woman is telling this young woman who's pregnant. Life is dangerous. When you have kids, all parents initially what they want to do is to protect them, but they will fail. But we still do our best. Remember the prodigal son? You do your best, but eventually kids will take your riches, will waste them, and they'll waste their youth and their time and energy. That's what happens. Okay. So, no ugly person in that community, no homelessness, no poverty, no sickness, and no death. He just lives a very, very happy life. It's like when you take your companion home and your mom says, he is an idiot, stop hanging out with him. And what do you say? Mom, what do you know? Your mom knows a great deal. You're just a punk. Okay. Now, Siddhartha, that's his name, which means someone who simply pursues physical pleasures, is about the age 19. And something awful happens. Remember when we talked about Henry David Thoreau and Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King, that the worst thing that can happen to anyone in life is for them to run into someone at the right time, at the right place, where they are open and they are receptive. In other words, most often when life throws us an experience, we get excited and 10 minutes later we forget. Sometimes we think about the experience and then we forget. Sometimes if you are very, 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 very unlucky, an experience goes inside you and refuses to leave, and you begin to internalize. And as you begin to think about this experience more and more, it begins to occupy more and more space inside you. You guys remember my nephew who came to class last week with his friend Joseph from Cleveland. He's still here. So I had a call from my sister. He said, Amir, Arman wants to come and visit your class again. Is that okay? I said, yeah, it's okay. Can you tell him not to come visit you? Why? Well, he's been talking about these ridiculous ideas and he's thinking about like changing his major. He's like in dental school. Do you know how difficult it is to get accepted to a dental school? You know, it's not easy. And so I went to San Francisco yesterday and saw Arman, and his sister was there, of course, and his mom was there, my sister. And we tried to avoid anything philosophical. Why? Because his mother is frightened. She's scared, and rightly so. You know, he only has 3 more years until he becomes a dentist. But all of a sudden, should he come back to this class and should he be in the right place, there's a good chance that he may find what he's doing completely meaningless and irrelevant. And then what is he going to do? So, just in case you happen to be at the right time and the right place, okay. Now, there are certain things that you should understand, which is sometimes there are certain pains and certain confusions and certain aspects of loneliness and misery that are actually quite delicious, that are really nice. They make you think. They make you cry. You become very, very, very creative. Okay? Now, is it true that you may become like a Gilgamesh? You grow your hair long, you grow your beard long, you wear a robe and you walk into a no man's land where there are no people. Okay? All of your friends are like crocodiles and reptiles, right? So, the Buddha is walking around, Siddhartha at this stage. He's walking around and he sees someone like me, lost a lot of hair, the beard is gray, wrinkles around my eyes and my face, my back is hunched a little, my voice is tired and weary. And he looks at me and says, what happened to you? What do you mean, what happened to me? Why do you look like this? What do you mean? I am young, look at me. Why can't you look like me? I say, well, that stage for me is past. So, what is this that you're in? It's called old age, I tell him. And he asks me, am I going to be like that too? It happens to all of us. As time passes, it adds wrinkles. It removes your hair. It makes you gray. It makes you weary. But I have money. Matters very little. But I have dreams. Matters very little. Now, I see people who are much older than I am, but they don't force reflection upon me. I imagine that I'm going to stay alive for the next 100 years or so. I never think about getting old. But the tragedy for Siddhartha is that he takes the experience in, internalizes it. What does it mean to be old? My age. That you have more time behind you than ahead of you. What happens when you get old? You review your life and it doesn't amount to much. What does it mean to get old? You begin to walk slower. You begin to lose abilities. What happens when you get old? You lose vitality and vigor. What does all that mean? Well, if life is going to take all those things away from me, how should I best use them? Am I boring you? Should I stop and just go home?
No, something.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Taking tons of notes.
Yeah, I'm listening.
I'm absorbing the knowledge.
And so he goes to his father. And that's the second thing you need to understand. The moment you internalize and experience, what you want to do is you want to go to your friends and you want to vent. You want some closure. You want some healing. He goes to his father and says, Dad, why do you look like this? What do you mean? I mean, look at your beard. It's all gray. Look at your hair. It's all gray. Look at your back. It's hunched. So if I'm going to be like you, if your riches, our money isn't going to save me, if being a king isn't going to save me, how should I spend my time and my life? And Siddhartha comes to realize his father doesn't answer him. He doesn't know what to say. So going back to Emilia's question, let's just say that for a moment, I'll just make up a story, that she had an experience, that experience caused her loss, attachment. Let me start from the beginning, because that experience caused relationship. That relationship caused lots of emotions to flare up. Those emotions create attachment. In attachment, you give your identity to another. They become your son, you revolve around them, then you lose them. Then you go to someone who's a little older, and you say, well, this person being 62 certainly have lost a few things in life, has gone through some grieving stages. Let me ask him, Professor, what's the timetable for grief? And the truth is, there is nothing that I can say and there is nothing that I can do that can silence or remove the grief that lives inside her. It's something you have to do on your own. And for the first time, Emilia comes to realize something. I have all these degrees. She even calls me a professor. But she has lost something when she looks at me. She has lost respect for me because I can't answer her question adequately. And in her having lost respect for me, she feels alone. A professor is someone who can profess, who can inspire, who can solve, who can give answers. And this guy, despite all of his information, knowledge, wisdom, supposedly, he can't give me any of those things. Why should I respect him? And then she comes to class and she plays with her cell phone. Why? She knows I have no answers to her big questions. Siddhartha's father can't say anything to him. People get old, and there is no solution to that. But the story doesn't end there. As he is mulling over this experience, he sits in his room for a week being completely depressed. Then he says, I just need to go out and get some air. As he is walking in the streets, he sees the same man, me. And I am coughing like the way I have been for the past 3 weeks in this class. Why are you coughing? I've never coughed in my life. What in fact is that called? It's called coughing. Why are you coughing? I'm sick. Why are you sick? Well, that's what happens when you get old. When you get old, you give Kaiser more visits. That's what you do. But I'm young. Matters very little. You will get old and you will get sick. What happens when you're sick? What happens when you're in a grieving stage? When you're depressed? When you have lost meaning in life? When you have lost yourself in grief? When there is this hole you find yourself in and you want to climb out, but there are no ladders and there are no ropes? What do you do? When you're emotionally sick? Nothing. You can't do anything. You feel helpless and hopeless. And so he goes to his father and says, Dad, I saw you vomiting the other day. What is that? Sick. Well, when you're sick, who can help you? Nobody. But you're a king. You have all these people loving you. Why don't you invite them? In sickness, you want to be left alone. So if old age makes you alone, and if sickness makes you alone, what's the use of pursuing money and buying houses and governing people? In the end, what do we have? And again, he comes to realize that his father is incompetent. He can't say anything. And what you should at least learn from the story of Siddhartha, I don't even know if the story is historically true, but what you should know is the following. Whenever you internalize an experience, whenever there is like real pain inside you, learn how to live with it by yourself, because no one can give you answers. You can find an oasis, an umbrella, a shade for 10 minutes, but eventually you have to go back to the place of misery, reflection, pain. Then, after sitting in his room and being depressed for another few weeks, eventually he says, I need to go out and get some air. And again, he runs into me. Am I old? Yes. Am I sick? Yes. But there is something very different about me today. And it's something I think about every night when I go home, or every time I put my head on the pillow to sleep. If my wife and my kids come to wake me for a cup of coffee, what if my body's a little cold? What if I remain unmoved? What if I am dead? And that's exactly what Siddhartha sees. I saw Amir when he was young. I saw Amir when he got old. I saw Amir when he got sick. And now I see Amir when he is dead. What happens in death? Nothing. You're removed from life. You're forgotten. Elijah, who's not here, asked last night, or someone asked about the YouTube channel that Cassie Lipowitz made for me. And speaking of Cassie, she'll be here with her friend, Stacy, in this classroom next week, either a Monday or a Tuesday or Wednesday. In death, you become irrelevant. I loved my grandfather. When he died, I cried. I haven't thought about him for over 25 years. When my parents die, I will grieve their loss. But eventually I will forget. Every single one of my pursuits become meaningless. So the Buddha goes to his father and asks again, Dad, do we all die? Yeah. Now remember again the dangerousness of you listening to me, internalizing what I am talking about, taking the stuff home with you, talking with your companion or your friends about these ideas. And as you talk about these ideas more, you know what's going to happen. If your organism doesn't shut down, and if you keep encouraging this line of thinking and this line of thinking, they'll begin to occupy more and more and more space. And all of a sudden you realize you can't walk into life and have fun. Why? Because you think about time, you think about age, you think about vitality, and ultimately you think about how you should spend your time while you are healthy. Okay? That's one of the most puzzling things I see about Trump, an 80-year-old man who never looks himself perhaps in the mirror and says, man, you know, I am getting old. And as you get older, you get sicker. And eventually you'll die. Maybe I should be a little nicer to people. You know. So, these difficult events that occur in his life kind of makes him homesick. He doesn't have a home anymore. He doesn't know where he belongs anymore. He doesn't have a father. He doesn't have any friends. Remember what I said. The moment you suffer a huge loss, you feel abandoned and you feel all alone. And that's the story of the Buddha some 3,000 years ago. Life has nothing to offer him. Why? Because ultimately life kills him. Now there is another way you can look at this. So let me give you this other version that I think is much more applicable for us. There is another, let me just give you this and then I'll give you another version of this. There is this fourth episode that happens in his life where he goes out and he sees this man, Rhett. And now remember, when you're thinking deeply about things, you don't smile, you don't laugh. Life is not funny. Life all of a sudden becomes a very, very, very serious business. The moment you want to recover from alcoholism or from any addiction, all of a sudden you become a profoundly serious human being. Okay? Now, Siddhartha runs into Rhett in deep reflection. He is mourning the loss of the fact that he is young but he can't have fun. The fact that he is young, he thinks about sickness. The fact that he's young but he thinks about death. And the fact that he's young but there is no place he can go to have fun. He looks at Rhett and he sees that Rhett is smiling. Why are you smiling? Don't you know that life is filled with sadness and misery and pain? Rhett says, no. I have understood life. I know what life is all about. I have no home. I have no money. I have no parents. I have come to understand that I came into the world naked and I shall depart naked. All relationships are an illusion. Everything is a joke. You have to take it seriously, but it's a joke. Now Siddhartha looks at Rhett and says, well, I want to be like you. No, you can't. Get lost. Now, this other version is the following. I usually come to this class with a cup filled with tea. And I usually leave the class with the cup filled with tea. I dump it in the garden outside. I don't drink it. And there's a good reason. I drank my first cup of coffee this morning at 4, and then another at 5. Then I exercised a little bit. Then I drank another few cups at 7 and then 8. I got to the office around 2. Drank a few cups. The first cup was so good. I hadn't eaten anything while asleep. And so when I woke up, I just pushed the button and this tea or coffee began to brew. Great. But the second cup wasn't as fun. The third cup, I guess I was just bored. The fifth cup, I guess I was more bored. The sixth cup, I think I was just in the habit of just making coffee. Just hearing this coffee just dripping down. And then it made me think, it matters little what we do. Everything in life goes through these three stages. Initially, every experience gives birth to a desire, a pleasure. You have fun. It's enjoyable. You fantasize about coffee in the morning. You fantasize about having a boyfriend or a girlfriend, graduating from school, getting married, having children, buying a house. They're beautiful. And then you get a taste of it. And then the second sip, and then the third and the fourth. And for some strange reason, your taste buds no longer inspire you the way they used to. And you realize something devastating. The taste of coffee has gotten old. It was fresh. It was a newborn. It was inspirational. But now, it's old. And you know what happens when something gets old? It's no longer interesting. In about an hour, I will dump this. You know why? It has no meaning for me. You know why? It is dead to me. I have no feeling towards it. There is no attachment. Imagine if you were to embody these three stages of experience. New, exciting, old, boring, and sickening, and then you lose interest completely. Can any of you in this class name anything that can last if every pursuit ultimately ends in you and I losing interest? What is then worth pursuing? Be like him. Get married, knowing full well you will lose interest. That doesn't mean divorce. It means you understand the nature of human relationships. Have children, knowing full well that eventually you're going to look at them, but you won't see the innocence. You'll just see kids as a burden, as tiny little animals you try to protect with all of your mights. And eventually you will walk away, if not physically, certainly emotionally, because you realize now they are 17 or 18. They have their own job. They have their own money. They have their own car. And should you push a bit too much, they will look at you and say, Mom, Dad, I've decided to leave. There is a reason why the monk in the last experience of Siddhartha's life is just laughing. He is very much in life, but indifferent towards everything that life has to offer. When you're indifferent, you can't love. You want to, but you can't. Because you know too much, and you see too much, and you understand too much. You will fall in love despite everything that we've talked about tonight. Despite the fact that some of you in this class may even embody these ideas, you will fall in love. But you will fall in love in a profoundly detached way. You won't be as caring. Again, it doesn't mean you won't love. It just means there's a distance between you and the person or the object. Is that the right time? Thank God. It is the right time. Anyways, so we have another hour. Jesus Christ. Do you have any questions? Let me just pause for a minute and see if there are any questions and maybe talk about things that are a bit more fun. Yes, E. Yeah, Matt.
So is Armand doomed already?
Oh, no.
Because he already got a taste? Like, is your sister going to be able to talk him out of
Oh, yeah, he's been talked out.
becoming a philosopher?
Oh, yeah. Unless he comes, every single day for the next 3 weeks, and that's a different story. Yeah. Male to male relationship is very different than male to female relationships. I've had in the past some male students who came over the house every single day and they helped me with the backyard. But at a certain point, the male psychology, because of maybe it's just biological evolution, where we have been, hunters for the longest time, so there's a good amount of our brain space that enjoys violence very much and domination. So there is a part of male psychology that desires domination. So my male students, usually after maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years, what they really want to do is just have their own voice, and they begin to manipulate and exploit whatever space they're occupied. Women aren't like that. First, it takes a lot for a man to grow love for a teacher. It's not as difficult for a woman. And so when you look at the spiritual tradition, anyways, so yeah. Any other questions before we? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Am I?
Okay. Yeah, Andrew.
Is that dynamic a symptom? Is that a universal dynamic, or is that a symptom of the West that males do?
First of all, there is something about women that are much receptive to these ideas than men are. I don't know why. I don't have the answers. All I know from my own experience for the past 30 years is that, which is interesting because my teacher was Hussein, the person I was working with, and in our culture, it wouldn't be appropriate for us to have a female student. He was married, and so when a woman comes in, we had maybe in the 10 years of our gatherings, just a couple times where we had female women coming in and just sitting, and they were family friends. So the culture didn't really permit, This is a different culture. One of the problems of this culture is because you don't have the literature, and it's not really a spiritual culture. It's mostly a very physical culture. You don't have the proper narratives. The other aspect of it is the component of love and romanticism. The West has romanticized life to a great degree after the 18th century. So when it comes to this stuff, it also gets romanticized. So when you go on YouTube and you, listen to these so-called teachers talking about life and meditation and overcoming certain habits and this, it's really just a series of bumper stickers, okay? If you go to the East and Near East and the Asian cultures and examine the spiritual tradition and kind of the path that they offer you, it's really quite rigorous. They demand, at a certain point, you need to kind of just submit and just say okay to whatever is that's taking place, because of the concept of individuality, independence, rights. These become obstacles. It doesn't mean that it's impossible, but it just makes things a bit more difficult. But for whatever the reasons are, women have a tendency of understanding this stuff intuitively. And one of the reasons why they don't become good teachers is because most of what women really understand and experience are on an intuitive level. Okay? And so when it comes time for them to express how they feel and what they understand, the language isn't there. Okay? What makes it relatively better for men, and by men I mean a man who eventually becomes a teacher of sorts, is that they're like the Buddha story. They have everything. They have great parents. They have a great culture. They are very, very privileged. I mean, Gandhi was privileged, Martin Luther privileged, Malcolm X was privileged, Moses privileged, Muhammad privileged, all these rich people, okay? There comes a point where their life, like Viktor Frankl, they kind of look at life and they find it meaningless. And when I say meaningless, I mean, it's like going to Costco, but you can't see anything that you enjoy. In other words, you can't see your own reflection in any of the shelves, so you walk out empty-handed, okay? So someone like the Buddha walks into life, doesn't find anything interesting, finds himself irrelevant and meaningless. And that meaninglessness is what we call the desert life. And in the desert life, بکشت خاطرم جز غم نرویه به باغم جز گل ماتم نرویه به صحرای دلم بی حاصل ما گیاه ناامیدی هم نرویه. That you get to a place where you're not even hopeless anymore. That even this branch of weed doesn't exist inside. You just sit there. You just sit there. مرده‌ای هم میروم بر روی خاک زنده گردان جانم جان بخش پاک. That you're just a corpse. There is nothing about you that's interested in anything, that is depressed about anything. There is nothing to hang on to. In depression, you read a book. In depression, you pray. In depression, maybe you scream. In the absence of those expressions, even depression loses its meaning. And men have to go through those things. And if they can overcome it, then they can possibly become a relatively good teacher. Now, the problem with being a teacher is that there are different stages that you go through. When you're young, a young teacher is very hopeful. And hope is just really this unrealistic aspect of human life. That you have this idea that you can change a lot of different things, that you can kind of go inside people and change them from the inside. It doesn't work. Okay. A seasoned, and so when you're young, a young teacher and have a lot of hope, the assumption is, I'm going to walk into my classroom, there are going to be 40 students, and I'm going to inspire all of them. Okay. And then it is true that people begin to ask a lot of questions. They come visit in your office, and then that inflates your illusion a bit more. Yes, they're asking a lot of questions because I'm so good. Yes, they're coming to the office because I'm so good. Okay. Then you realize that there's a huge difference between inspiration and commitment. And that's something that a teacher learns much later in life. You know, and some people never get it, but some people do get it. And so when you get to a seasoned teacher, they become very particular. They become a Scrooge of their time, of their energy, of a whole host of things. So if you are new to the game, it's always best to hang out with a young teacher because they will always inspire you and give you hope. The older teacher will inspire you as well, but they will start demanding things from you like 2 weeks into the game. And you say, well, this is too early. I'm not ready for all this stuff. What the hell is wrong with this guy or this gal? So, yeah. I think whenever you understand anything, really understand, initially you want to share it, but then when you realize it falls on deaf ears, then you kind of take a few steps back and you become very selective as to who you want. It's very much like, you get to a place where you say, I just want to lay my body next to someone who I find to be worthy and valuable. Ideas are no different. Anyone else? Yeah.
A couple stories back, you talked about Buddha and he as an example. Said that when Buddha met, understanding, so I was smiling.
understanding brings depression or whatever, sadness. Does that mean that there are two ways to think about it?
There's what?
Does that mean that there's two ways to accept and perceive, maybe not perceive that, but I guess literally just two ways of feeling about it. You can switch it from either you could smile and understand, or you could be sad and understand.
I think when sometimes you happen to be, say, let's say you go out with your friends, but you happen to be in a relatively interior mood, you know, you're much more within, and you want to get out and have fun with your friends, but for some strange reason you just woke up from a nap and you just can't do it. And so your friends begin to like do some silly things, and you smile. And your smile is not one of humor. It has a good amount of tragedy behind it. You understand the silliness, you understand your friends being like somewhat idiots, stupid, and you question why you're with them in the first place, but you smile nevertheless. Now, your friends looking at you, seeing that you're smiling, they begin to assume that you're actually having fun being around them. Hello, Abi. How are you? When in fact, there is nothing fun about you and them. So I suppose what the monk is doing with a smile is he's looking at the rest of us, you know. You know, sometimes people come after class and say to me, you know, I got like a 70 on my paper. Can you explain to me why? And so they have like listened to this talk for that's about 30 minutes long or 40 minutes long. And they have written maybe two very, very tiny paragraphs. And they're wondering why they got a 70. And I look at them and I don't know what to do with that question. I smile and try to be as respectful as possible. I said, well, let me review your work and I'll get back to you. And they say, yes, please do that. And what I get from that interaction is that this person just doesn't understand anything, you know. And because they have zero understanding about things, they come up and ask for things they don't really deserve. And you smile and you're respectful, but you don't really respect them in any sort of a way, except the fact that they're just, you know, kind of ridiculous. So, I wasn't talking about anyone in this class. There's like another class I'm teaching. Yeah, go ahead.
So would it be just good or bad how you see it? Or it's not good or bad how you see it? Or okay or sad?
I think when it comes to people with whom you don't have much of a relationship, you kind of just look at them, you kind of smile and walk away. With people with whom you do have a relationship, because you understand the complexities of change. Let's say you have a girlfriend and she smokes a lot, and you like her, you love her, and you sit and you talk with her, and you've done so plenty of times, but it just doesn't sink in. Say, listen, my parents are coming over. Can you just smell like normal? You have to be like this, idiot, you know? And she says, okay, no, I will quit, I promise. And she doesn't. And after 2 years, you kind of just see her smoke, and you can just look at her. And even though you know your parents are coming over, you won't say much to her. You just tell your parents, you know, we're just going to go out to eat. My girlfriend is staying home. She's not coming with us. You're not divorcing. You're not walking away from the relationship. But you realize the difficulties of change. And you also realize the futility of having a conversation with someone who's not ready. And I think in that understanding, there is both humor and there is also sadness. Yeah. Anyone else? No? All right. Okay, let's move on. So, Siddhartha has no money, he has no parents, he has no kingdom, he has no home. Since life can't offer me any meaning, maybe religion can, he says. So he goes to the forest, the place of purity and innocence, where organisms just grow organically. And he finds a few monks, and he sits with them, and he meditates, for those of you who asked about meditation a couple of days ago. And he fasts, and he does all these tricks. And he has experiences, he has dreams, he has all the body experiences, I suppose. He respects some of the teachers he's working with. But he comes to understand that dreams can inspire you for a week, then you'll forget them. Whatever it is that you experience under the sun, you will eventually forget. They will lose value. They will lose intensity. You won't feel much about them anymore. And Siddhartha says, I'm not here for a quickie. I'm not here just to have an experience. I'm here to understand. Now, a mark of a really, really, really good student, it's like the mark of a really, really good relationship. It's not just founded on sex, it's also founded on good conversations, on doing the dishes, doing the vacuuming, and sometimes just being alone, and sometimes being bored and being okay with all of it. Because you understand that is how relationships are, and that's how they function, and that's how they evolve and devolve, and that's how they fluctuate. The Buddha argues, the Siddhartha, that don't be like one of those people in Berkeley, who go to Bikram yoga and have an experience and talk about it endlessly. That experience doesn't mean anything. Just because you do psychedelics and you saw yourself sitting next to Jesus Christ and he said a few things to you, that doesn't mean anything. Experiences don't mean anything. If you want transformation in a real way, it needs to be through understanding, not simply experiences, feelings, emotions, thoughts. You need to understand. That's the only thing that will never ever leave you unless you get dementia. It's one thing to join a mass movement, going to San Francisco and saying, down with ICE, or down with Trump, or down with this, or down with that, and then getting back into your Hummer, and then driving back to Oakland and living the life that you've always lived. A waste of energy, a waste of money, just a waste of life. Someone who really, really, really understands, their entire life revolves around that understanding. Okay? He comes to realize that these experiences don't mean anything, and these teachers, so-called teachers, they don't really mean anything either. So he leaves them. And then he sits quietly by himself, and he says to himself, I will either sit, think, understand, and then go back into life, or I will just die. Life is not worth living. I will suicide. Now, lucky for us, I suppose, the Buddha sits, he begins to reflect, he has an experience, that experience is accompanied with a good amount of understanding, then he comes back to us. And he has his own gospel, and it's called the Four Noble Truths. Now, initially, it used to be called the Four Golden Truths. You can have a soul that's made of iron. You can have a soul that's made of bronze. You can have a soul that's made of silver, or you can have a soul that's made of gold. So initially, before his teachings became contaminated, the Four Noble or Golden Truths are only reserved for those who have a noble or a golden soul. not for us. I am bored. Do you have any questions? Questions are like spices, you know. Avi? Yeah, I'm sorry. They couldn't show up today, Cassie and Stacy. So, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Do you watch TikTok? Instagram? YouTube? Depending on your age and maturity, what at least these artists, let's just call them artists, realize is that sex sells. Porn sells. The more skin you show, the more clicks you will get, and consequently, the more money you will make. Okay. Now, what is a golden soul? It's a great question. I don't know if I have the answer, but let me just wing it. I think all of us in this class have something to offer. You know, sometimes I am lonely and I want to lay with someone. And I speak about certain ideas or I speak about certain stories, but I'm not really interested in stories. What I really am using those stories for is to just get my body next to someone. In other words, there is something you have and there is something you want. And if you want those needs to be met, you have to advertise them. If you want to have a serious conversation, let's just say about grief tonight, raise your hand, ask your question, but advertise that question in a way that's eloquent, that's meaningful, that's serious, that when you talk about it, you embody the question. It is my question because I am going through it. Now, once you advertise that, and I hear it, and I make fun of it, you realize I am not a customer to your advertisement. So you move on. Then you go to him, and then you advertise that question, and he looks at you, and he sits quietly, listens to you, respects your question, tries to understand your question by asking follow-up questions. And then you realize he catches your advertisement. And then you say, let's go sit somewhere, let's talk about this. So I suppose the Buddha, okay, he doesn't really want to talk about his parents. What he wants to talk about is, listen, I had 3 experiences, very, very profound. Things get old, things get sick, and things become irrelevant, i.e. death. Okay? I don't want to have a cheap conversation because eventually I will lose interest. I want to have a conversation that has depth. Do you have the capacity for it? Because if you do, then your soul is gold very much like mine. Now, here's the thing about the Buddha and all the other teachers. All of us imagine that what lives inside us and what occupies us and what we are focused on or in, they are most important and most valuable. And we are looking for someone who shows us some interest in the things that we are interested in. The Buddha, supposedly, is a serious man. He's a serious man because he looks at life seriously. And he wants serious customers. And the people who are serious, he calls them noble. He calls them golden. He doesn't want to have a conversation and then you going home and then forgetting about the conversation. That for him is like a prostitutes. You have sex with them, you have a great time with them, but once you are done, once you pay them, they go away and you will forget about them. He doesn't want that. He really wants to contaminate us. And that's one of the tragedies, and I suppose blessings of teachers. They want to contaminate us. And those who are contaminated, they're like cancer, you know? And if you live with that contaminant, then I suppose you can be categorized as someone who has a golden soul. If you go to an AA meeting, the person guiding the group, he wants his customers to return again and again and again and again until they are poisoned by the idea of rehab. But someone who comes, listens, leaves, disappears for 5 months, then comes back again, then disappears for another 5 months, they're never going to get healed. And one of the nice things about the Hindu tradition, the Buddhist tradition, Confucius tradition is that they are really, really practical and they are psychological. If you're a Christian and you happen to be in a relationship, an abusive relationship, Jesus isn't going to do much for you. I think Jesus will help you abuse yourself more by giving your companion infinite amount of love, compassion, and forgiveness. And you're going to just waste your life. In the Buddhist tradition, what happens, it's because it's more psychological. It says, what are you doing? How are you thinking about this? Do you know much about relationships? Sit, think, internalize, understand the Four Noble Truths. Is your Buddha seed, is this relationship nourishing it or killing it? And there is no forgiveness. There is no compassion. The only person you need to forgive yourself, and the only person who demands compassion is yourself, nobody else. So going back to your question, anyone who finds us interesting, they are noble. Anyone who finds us uninteresting, they are disnoble, unnoble, lack noble, they're just not noble. Yeah.
So when Siddhartha meets the monk, who's just kind of laughing at everything, you wouldn't consider that monk to have a golden soul because like he's not buying what Siddhartha's selling. But
First of all, he's not yet in the stage, I don't think. I mean, I wasn't there, but I'm just guessing. He's not really at a stage where he can understand what a monk is and what it means to be a monk and how it feels to be a monk. That's number one. Second, it's the conversation we had last night that maybe Siddhartha looks at this monk but doesn't intuit that he can learn anything from this particular person. Again, to kind of go back to what I said last night, I think you try to understand the relationship between a teacher and a student and you can't. The teacher is here, the student is here. What the teacher says, the student can't understand. The student can only feel. Understanding comes much, much later. Okay? Understanding usually happens when it's kind of like if you have seen a cow eat food, they have like 4 bellies, you chew first belly, you bring it up, you chew some more second belly, you bring it up, third belly and the fourth belly, and then you poop what you need out. And I think what happens is that when you have enough passion and enough love for your teacher, you listen, you feel, you try to think about the stuff that you've heard, and you come to some understandings, but they're usually incomplete. The relationship between a student and a teacher, it just happens. You don't know why all of a sudden you like someone. And you don't like them for their body, you don't like them for their emotions, you don't like them for their intellect. There is something else about this person that pulls you towards that person. Okay? At a later date, when time passes, then their body, the space they occupy, then their emotions and their thought process, everything begins to matter. You like to be around them all the time. because they embody something you're hungry for. You can't describe it, you can't explain it. No one understands this relationship. You certainly don't understand it. All you know is that you just want to be around that person. It's kind of like when we fall in love with someone. I mean, they're like anybody else, but for some strange reason, you just enjoy being around them and you don't want to leave them. So going back to your question, I don't think the Siddhartha looks at this kid and says, well, yeah, I think he's going to be my teacher. He's not there yet. Any one else before we, no? What time is it? Half hour, damn it. Okay. I would rather spend the last 20, 30 minutes playing with the questions you may have. If you don't, then I'm forced to kind of just talk about the Four Noble Truths, which are very, 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 very boring. So I'm going to count to 3. If there are no questions, I'll just do the Buddha. Anyone? Fine. Now, who does your Hana?
Your wedding.
Yeah, useless. Yeah, they're great. Good for you. So the first noble truth is really quite simple. At least it sounds simple. Life is suffering. Please, yes.
You say a lot of stuff about life and suffering.
First of all, I didn't say it. The Buddha said. You have a beef with him, you send him a message.
Is there anything good about life?
Yeah, everything is good about life, as long as...
According to you, it's everything is a shithole that
Whoa, 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 whoa! That's like Middle Eastern language.
Well, it is, that's what you,
Well, let me
that's what
explain.
I intake from.
You have intaken properly, accurately, rightly. Good for you. You're a wise woman.
But why
Well, I'm going to explain. Okay, go make it good. If you can't go, and when you've made it really good, send me a message. All right, so life is suffering. Why? Don't you want to be happy?
I do, your class is just
Forget my class.
but the way you,
Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Don't you want to be happy?
yeah, well, I am.
Where do you go to find happiness? Costco? And that's the problem. Why is life filled with suffering? Because there is something about us human beings. We want to be happy. You want to be free. You want to look yourself in the mirror and be happy and satisfied with the life you've created. You want to be able to express how you feel adequately. You want to love. You don't want to be betrayed. You want to go into society and not see tents. You don't want to see homelessness. You don't want to see injustice. You don't want to see confusion. You don't want to see sickness. You don't want to see people with cancer 4. You don't want to see divorce. None of us in this class walk into any part of life desiring to be sad or miserable. I cried for a fucking bike to be happy. And I was for 10 minutes. And then I realized I want something else. I don't even know what it is that I want. I just want something else. The bike is no longer doing it for me. So I got a car. I was so happy. And then there came a point when my wife says, can you drive your brand new car down the hill and get some milk? I said, no, I don't want to drive. I don't want to go anywhere. But you just got a car to be happy. Yeah, but there's no place to go now. Let's go to San Francisco. I've been there plenty of times. We are looking for permanence. Permanence. All of us in this class sometimes sit with our companions and we say, let me read you the poem you wrote for me 10 years ago. Why do you do that? Because the guy doesn't write you poetry anymore. You buy a home, you go on vacation. You go on vacation, you want to go back home. You get married, you want to divorce. You're divorced, you want to get married. You have kids, you want to push them back into your belly. They're back in your belly, you want to push them out. The flaw is not life. Life is good. There is something wrong with us. We fail to accept life the way it is. The fuck do you guys expect coming to this class? Entertainment for like 3 hours? It's school. It's boring. Come here expecting to be bored. But no, you say, Professor, can you make this a bit more exciting? Fuck you! It's not a party. It's not a club. You get into a relationship. It's all commandments. I made you for love, not fucking washing dishes all day long. Well, maybe you just don't understand what marriage is then. Maybe you're just stupid. I love my kids, but you know what? They suck. Well, what the hell did you expect? Didn't you suck as a kid? Didn't you broke your parents' hearts? Well, the kids are doing the same thing to you. I love my job. The money is really good. But all of a sudden, it's just not enough. I ran into the vice president here just before coming to class, accidentally on the elevator. We both got hired in 2004. I love her. She's a great woman. You know, very kind, very spunky. What are you doing? And she had just gotten her PhD from Santa Cruz in sociology. You know, she was excited when she got this job. I said, so, what's your plan? I asked her. She brings out her phone and she gives me this date. What is this? I'm going to retire in 11 months. Things become unfun so quickly. And we are the sort of animals that don't enjoy unfun. We go into things because we want them to be fun forever. Why do we create these stupid romantic movies? Because they give the illusion of foreverness. Meet Joe Black. Have you seen that movie? Now, this does not mean, remember, life is great. There is T.S. Eliot. Yeah. He had argued that an orange, what is it that an orange wants? Simply being an orange. The orange can't be anything else but an orange. How about a cat? The cat doesn't want to be anything else other than a cat. A human being. Do you know how many identities I've had over the past like 62 years? And every desire you have is like you become a brand new human being. Why can't I just accept myself and life the way it is? Because I can't. Everything is moving. Everything is shifting. So, now this doesn't mean that life is bad. What it does mean is that when we walk into life and we create relationships with life, we expect the wrong things. Don't come to class expecting to have fun. This is school. Don't get into a relationship expecting to be in love. It's just work. Don't have children expecting that it's going to be enjoyable. No, that is gone after like 3 weeks. Everything is just hard work. Being alive is just work. So when you wake up in the morning, say, life is going to shit all over me. And I'm going to do the best I can. You know, every 5 minutes I'm going to go home and just take a shower. And the way you do it is by looking at life and yourself in the proper way. You're a woman. It means that when a man looks at you, what do you think he's going to look at? What, your soul? He's going to be interested in your culture, in your language, in your religion? Are you kidding? No, that's stupid. You see a man, he's a visual creature. He's going to look at you as a woman. And he's going to desire your body. Maybe later on, if you have anything that's valuable inside, like your intellect, maybe then you can express that to your man. And maybe he won't be an idiot. He'll understand, he'll then respect you. But initially, to say, I'm a woman and I need to be respected as such, what the hell does that even mean? In a culture that's everywhere you look around is sex. It means you're just setting yourself up for failure. So, the first noble truth. Using Oakland language, life is shit. But what makes life so shitty? Number one, for some strange and awful reason, we are looking for perfection. We are looking for happiness. We are looking for beauty. And everything that you and I do, you're in school for one simple reason. You want to beautify your life. You want to graduate. You want to get a job. You want to make money. You want to buy a house. You want to find a decent companion. That is what you want. Some achieve it, most people don't. There is another reason as to why we suffer. When you and I have experiences fall into 3 or 4 different categories. Some experiences are painful. Some give us a good amount of pleasure. Some, they mean nothing for us. So we're indifferent towards them. The pleasures we remember, the pain we remember. Whatever you remember, whatever that's stored in your memory bank, it makes you you. All of us in this class have trigger points. You know why we have them? We assume that we are the owners of these experiences. We created them. And so anyone who we assume disrespects those experiences, all of a sudden we have negative emotions. We identify with our bodies, we identify with our minds, and we identify with our emotions. I am from Iran. That's one way. So if you call me a camel jockey, I'm just going to drop you from the class. Am I going to sit back and say to myself, well, if that person was not ignorant, a stupid human being, he would never or she would never say such a thing? I would simply react. And why do I react? Because I actually think I am Persian. When in fact, I'm simply a human being looking for happiness given to me by my cultural narratives. Me being Persian is purely accidental. If my parents were in India, had sex in India, I was born in India, I'd probably worship Krishna. Or maybe Ashwara Rai. Sorry, Amir. She used to be very cute. Now she is. And the problem, if you want to go on a spiritual quest, is the following. You are not your body. You are not your mind and your memories. You are not your emotions. Unless you become a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. I mean, it's a beautiful saying that the kingdom of God lives inside you. But it's just not physical. And it has nothing to do with your physical experiences. Today I stood in front of a mirror and I said to myself, Amir, it's time for you to shave. Then I said, Amir, you're going to talk about Buddhism tonight. You're now your beard. The amount of time we spend worshipping our physical vanities. So, just a brief recap. We make life smell bad because we are looking for the wrong things from life to give us. Life is not there to give us happiness. Life is there to give us experiences. That's all. That's the only thing life does. We want permanence, but life doesn't do that. Life gives us inspiration, then it makes the inspiration get old, then it forces us to feel indifferent towards the experience. Everything we touch will eventually turn to dust. Do you have any questions? Olivia.
What if you actually like the idea that everything has to
Everything has to?
suffer in the world?
Can I tell you a story? I think as bumper stickers go, your comment is really, really, really good. But let me kind of just stop talking about Buddhism and tell you a story that comes from an Indian philosopher, sage, saint, prophet. His name is Ramana Maharshi. Maharshi is known to be the silent sage of India. And some of you have heard the story before, so my apologies for the repeat. Around the age 12, he goes home into the kitchen to make himself a sandwich. He feels as if he's going to die. And so, you know, when you're in a philosophical culture, when you're born in it, these things are not that strange. So you lay your body flat on the kitchen floor, and all of a sudden he sees himself like floating. And he is up there and he looks down and he says, ah, that's my body, but I'm not my body, I am this other thing. He drops back into his body. He goes to his brother's room while he's asleep. He steals some money, buys a train ticket, gets on the train, and goes to this town where all the monks supposedly go to, and all the temples that are there. And he sits in this, I guess, basement of a temple, you know. And he goes into this trance for a long while. And when they discovered him, cockroaches and ants had, you know, bitten his legs. There was blood all over the place. So they find him, they bathe him, they heal him, and they create for him a temple. He comes to realize that there are certain things in life that can never be put in language. چون قلم در می نوشتن می شتافت، چون به عشق آمد قلم از خود در خود شکافت. That I am writing so fast about this and that, and then my pen comes to the point of writing about love. And the moment I force the pen to write about love, the pen explodes, saying that I am unworthy to write about love. And love can't be explained or described or articulated. So don't defile me. Use me for other things, but not love. So Ramana Maharshi comes to realize that the most important things in life can't really be put in language. So he takes a vow of silence, kind of like another Indian sage whose name is Meher Baba. Meher means compassion and Baba means father. How's that chocolate, by the way? Is it any good? Okay. So, sometimes, again, if you happen to be in the right place, right time, and you have the right capacity, experiences, when they go inside you, they crystallize inside you. It's like you become a mountain. This mountain has a good amount of pressure in it, and this pressure all of a sudden creates diamonds. Or if you happen to be an oyster, whether your mouth opens and you either get one sand in your mouth, or some air in your mouth, all of a sudden you close your mouth and it actually agitates, you know, the oyster. And so all those chemical reactions take place, and before you know it, you have this beautiful pearl. So Ramana Maharshi had this experience, and it's crystallized inside him. He becomes this like powerhouse. And when they ask him about his experiences, he doesn't say anything. And so they build this temple around him or for him. And every morning he just goes and sits. And people just go to see him. And they have this experience about him. Initially, his mother, who he left when he was very young, his mother is diagnosed with breast cancer. And he says, I have no one in life anymore except my son. So I'm going to go on this quest before I actually die to see if I can find him. So she figures out where he's giving sermons or where he's sitting. So she goes there. And the moment Ramana Maharshi sees, and he hadn't seen, you know, his mother for like 30, 40, 50 years. He walks towards her, comes to realize that she has breast cancer. She lays her down, and he puts his palm, his hand on her chest, and has her close her eyes, and then she passes away. Now, because I think he understands life much better than I do, and because he understands life and death much better than I do, and because he understands that ultimately in life, you have to go on your own journey in life, and you have to do it on your own. You know, because he understands the struggles of life so well, he doesn't suffer as much. He knows how to handle suffering. He knows how to handle grief. I think your statement is very, very, very accurate. Life can be wonderful if you know how to suffer well. My father-in-law, who died of cancer, he didn't know how to suffer well. He didn't know how to suffer well because he really just didn't know how to live well. His life was just a complete mess. And so, anyways, one else before we go home? How's the chocolate? That's it? Abid? You can be the last question, and then we'll go home. Can I do this differently? And it may have nothing to do with your question. I can appreciate the fact that I met you when you were 18 and now you're close to being 50. I can appreciate the fact that you're married and have children, and that despite not being enrolled in this class every night, you come here. For me, what I would want to do is I want you to have a relationship with me. And then I can manipulate you and exploit you and coerce you. And in that relationship, if it gets to a place where you submit, you say, Amir, I respect you enough and I love you enough and I like you enough, and just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Say, okay, you need to go to school and get your master's degree. And then I'll do the best I can. I'll tell you, once you get your master's degree, I can open doors for you so you can start teaching. And instead of making $20 an hour, you can make $100 an hour. And then you can start teaching a couple classes here, a couple classes there. And before you know it, you're making $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month. It's not a bad life. So there are a couple of things that happen. First, we have to establish a relationship. That relationship has to be, for me, healthy enough where I'm allowed to exploit you without you complaining. I can kind of just tell you what to do, when to do it, how to do it, all those things. Then once that happens, I'll just give you tools. Practical tools, theoretical tools, hypothetical tools. And then I'll just push you away into school. And then you'll come back after a few years with a master's degree. Now you have your own classes to teach. You will never come to my classes again. And if you do, it's just going to be once in a while. My job is done. If you're looking for truth, which what philosophy perhaps and some aspects of religion may offer, I can't give that to you. No one can. There has to be enough dissatisfaction about you, enough pain about you, enough longing and yearning about you, that you must want something that nobody on this planet can give you. And at a certain stage, you need to get yourself in a fetal position, metaphorically or literally. When your husband is asleep, when your kids are asleep, you just sit somewhere. In a fetal position, maybe you lay down on the floor and you just kind of weep. And maybe you scream. And you say, what lives inside the books? I want them to live inside me. How can I make that happen? maybe magic will happen. Maybe you're not qualified for that. And you'll simply come to a place where you'll accept the fact that you're just a good student, but you will never get the answers you were looking for. Ramana Maharshi, it seems that he got what he was looking for. And he didn't want more, he didn't want less. He was okay with what little he got. And the Buddha was okay with what little he got. Moses wasn't okay. Moses was this greedy bastard. Moses said, I saw God, but I want God in society now. I want society to be beautiful. I don't want to see homelessness. I don't want to see lying and deceit. Moses really was looking for this huge transformation. He was greedy in a good way. And eventually he came to realize that people suck, society sucks, he's just going to leave. Near the end of his life, he realized his capacity. It's good to see all of you. Have a nice weekend. Don't hang out with losers. Yeah. So see you next week, Monday.